Hi everyone, here we go again to talk to you about paintings. I'm Donald Journey and I want to tell you a little bit about the process and a little bit about each painting. One I posted this morning, this particular one, is called Summer in the City, and if you saw my post, you'll know that I was thinking about the Loving Spoonful, and I wondered if all of us who've lived in cities at one stage or another don't remember those really sultry summer nights when there's a glow, people are under trees, perhaps there's music, there's certainly beer, the moon comes out and it becomes just a wonderful, magical place. This is what this particular painting is about, and although it's not a specific place, it's all places like that, and many of you had that same experience. I hope that it conveys all of that. It was great fun for me to do the warmth of all the electric light under the trees in contrast with the moonlight hitting the water. For me, it's as evocative as I wished it to be. I hope it is for you as well. Let's go this way now. This little painting was started at the grounds of the Clark Art Institute in Williamstown, and it was just a group of things at the side of the woods. And what I liked was the tremendous complexity of it. One of the things that I most enjoy is trying to create a sense of the myriad shapes and specific. I'm not much of a leaf painter, and this gives me an opportunity to see if I can convince you that all of these things are in fact green things. Very clearly I convinced someone. The one below it is from a workshop I taught last October at Spinocchia in Tuscany. Behind me was a whole big wood pile. Two of the students were busy stacking wood. They'll know who they are. And I enjoyed very much painting through this opening to the outside. It became rather a theme in my work in the last year or two, this whole idea of inside out. I've painted now quite a number of paintings on that theme. The one to my right is "The best way out is always through," and it refers to a line from a Robert Frost poem. And it, for me, is all about that sense that it appears that you will go and you will hit a block right there where all the green part is, but in fact, if you look closely, you can go out, in fact, and through both ways behind it. The moon is very hard to tame in paintings if you don't want the picture to be about the moon. I wanted the moon to be there, but not for it to be about the moon. There are lots of, I don't know if you'll be able to see it with the amount of light that is in here, but there are lots of violets and blues and pinks in the sky. That gives some sense of just a little bit of aerial perspective that you might not otherwise see. Let's head over this way. You may well notice that I paint in a number of different styles. It's not entirely because I have personality disorder. It's largely because I think that certain techniques suit better certain ideas that I have in my head. You look at these two in particular, this one is painted very roughly. This one couldn't be much more smooth. But one of the things that happens in fog, of course, is that all the details, or most of the details, drop out. This painting has been a very popular one among my pictures, and I love doing fog. Started, in fact, in Ireland, and it has now migrated to some place that's not necessarily Ireland, but it is really all about November. I care most about composition. I care most about the light. I'm most interested in showing these to you as if they were postcards about places that I have been, and postcards that I've sent to you so that you know what it was like, given what I've just done. This one, Rake of Day, New England, I regret to tell you is not a real place, but in many senses it's evocative of a whole bunch of places. Many old New England mill towns along rivers, perhaps the Merrimack, that are perhaps slightly past their glory moments now that we're in the 21st century, but they hold on and they are very much the bedrock of what it means to be a New Englander. That particular morning light, I think, is rather appropriate at the moment given our current scourge of the plague, and I like to think that its hopefulness is something that appeals to you. This little one started as a demonstration also at the workshop at Spinocchia in Tuscany last year. It was a glorious place to paint. I don't know how many of you have been there, but they housed us, they fed us, and all we had to do was paint, and it was wonderful. The light, of course, in Tuscany is particularly special. Instead of painting a view full of olive trees, in fact, I chose this garden shed and this little bit of garden, which was struggling along because it was late in the season, but there was still enough there to suggest that maybe fruits or vegetables were yet to be harvested. It's a very magical place, and I suggest that if you have the opportunity to go there, you should. This large painting, called Bramble Cottage, is a painting just from imagination, and it comes about probably from something deep within me. When I was a youngster, I was much entranced by the work of Andrew Wyeth, and I also learned, being a youngster who was paying attention, that the closer what I painted looked like Andrew Wyeth, the more applause I would get when I would bring it out into the living room. I, being nobody's fool, pursued that for a while. This is rather a throwback to when I painted a lot of Wyeth-esque things. There's a great deal of light in this gallery, and generally speaking, it would not seem quite as open as it does now. It's a little bit more mysterious. It's one of the issues and one of the good things about this huge skylight here at the Guild is that everything gets bathed in light. The whole sense that someone must have been there recently because the fire at least is on its last legs when it's going, that there's sunshine outside, and that one wonders what next is going to happen in this space. I like to create places that get your mind thinking. In this particular case, that whole sense that someone may have been there and is now left is an important part of what I was thinking about when I painted it. There was a painting I painted when I was very young called The Spy, and it was just a staircase in an old house, but I had been reading James Fenimore Cooper, and I liked the suggestion that either he was about to come or he'd just left, but in any event that the place was filled with his presence even though you couldn't see him. Down here on the bottom is a painting from Ogunquit in Maine, which is a wonderful painter's haunt. I've painted a great number of paintings there. This was certainly plein air. And it's just about a brisk New England day with that wonderful light along the sea. In this particular case, the sea is taken on a very deep cobalt color, and it's contrasted with, in the more shallow water, the green that shows up there in the sunlight. When I painted this and was posting it as I was doing it, the rocks were much more brown, and I think I was accused of the fact that I had made a whole pile of brownies, and perhaps that was because I'm so fond of brownies that it was in my head, but in any event, we made them less like brownies now. Up top is also a painting begun at the Clark Art Institute in Williamstown, and again, it's just a nondescript place. The background is something that I introduced. If you were to look at that carefully, you'll see a few leaves that are defined, and 3 flowers that are defined, but otherwise there are largely marks. When we look at something like that in real life, we see a whole bunch of complexity without necessarily identifying all the parts of it. When I make marks, for example, these marks, I assume that you're willing to agree with me that those are leaves of some sort. We may not know what they are. But what I like to do is I like to paint things in such a way that there's just enough information that you and I can enter into a compact of agreeing that those marks stand for this particular thing. If we do that, and we both know I really didn't paint leaves, then we both in fact entered into the process of making the picture, each in our own way, and we complete it together. And I think that's really important. Very often I'll use a shorthand to be a bush or whatever, on the hope that the viewer says, oh yes, that's a bush, because that's the way we perceive things out in the real world. This particular one is funny. It looks as though it's a plein air painting, but it's not. I had arrived in Ireland to teach a workshop, and I arrived several days early. And I went to this Arts Foundation, and they had arranged for me to do a demonstration. It turned out that I was doing it rather as a class for a bunch of elderly ladies who were all seated at tables, some of them painting a little bit in acrylic, others knitting or just talking. And so it was my job, having just arrived maybe a day or so before, somewhat jet lagged, to paint a picture of Ireland for them. And so this is my picture of County Mayo from my head that in fact looked very much like County Mayo. Let's go here. The top one, I started it in Ireland, and I only painted the top part of it. The whole bottom part was blank, and I came across it not so long ago and thought, well, I need to finish that picture. And I started to work on it and realized that what I had done was very dark. And at this particular moment, psychologically, I thought, I think I want some sunshine. And so it in fact became a somewhat different place. These bushes remain the same, but it's a good deal more cheerful and a little more optimistic than the start that I had made. Below it is a painting also based on a place at the Clark Art Institute in Williamstown. It doesn't now look anything like that. What I want it to look like is summer dusk, and if it does, then I've succeeded. It's very often, if you're looking at things like this against what is a relatively bright light in that sky, you'll see things that are weeds or maybe very small flowers, such as right there and right there, that in fact just become a purple haze. If you'll notice down here, I'm much less specific about the way in which I model things. In the trees, there's some stronger edges. Those flowers are definitely stronger. Right in here, it's more drawn. But when we look at something that's this expansive, we don't in fact focus on all the parts of it at the same time. We're unable to do that, and so we pick something out. Either we get the strong sense of the place and its general effect and the light, or we hone in on some particular item within it. This is my attempt to create rather a hierarchy for the viewer so that I tell you what you need focus on and what you don't. This one was great fun to do, and I love that time of the day. It's very difficult to do plein air because it only lasts for a very short amount of time. Many of you know that I had a house in France for a number of years, and though this is not that place, it's a reminder of what it was like to have lamplight inside the house when the moon came out, and I enjoy very much that contrast between the warm and cool colors. In almost all of these interiors, everything is made up, and it's a rather strange way to work, but I find that if I work from imagination and from memory, it keeps me from cluttering things with too much detail. Paintings I don't think ought to be about facts. I think they ought to be about feelings. And so to the extent to which I can discipline myself out of facts by not having the facts, I think it's easier for me to convey a particular idea to you. People have very much enjoyed this worn carpet, which was great fun to paint. But of course, they like best those little ripples that somebody's going to trip on very soon. It's possible somebody is out in the barn, or the grange, as they would say, and going to come in. It's just about maybe welcome, about transition from inside to outside, which I like so much. That leads to one more painting inside. There is a painting in the window at the Guild, which is called The Painter's Holiday. It's the inside of a railway carriage looking out onto a French landscape. On the seat opposite where the painter sits are a whole lot of his painting. Again, it's an evocative thing. It started with a poem by Edward Thomas called Edelstrape, and which is a wonderful poem. You should look it up. Edelstrape is really about a train stopping in Gloucestershire for a few minutes. Nobody got on, nobody got off, and then the train leaving, and it's a wonderful, wonderful poem. Although my picture is set in France, because I'm more familiar with it, it's again about that same feeling of sort of a hot day and coming to a stop. I can hear, because I'm perhaps over imaginative, I can hear that from the steam, and it's just something that I like. When I paint most of these interiors, I wind up telling myself stories, and I think, well, if this is like that, then what would be there? If Mrs. Smith collects these would she also have a whatever? And it's probably the way I keep myself amused, since I'm easily amused. We look at a painting that now probably is everyone's most favorite in the exhibition, at the far end, Potting Shed. If you were listening last week, you heard me talk about the painting on the opposite end of the gallery, the one with the tulips, about being a bit of a tribute to my late sister. At the time that it became clear that she was probably not going to be able to be with us much longer, I painted a 3046, this is 3630, of the inside of a potting shed. And I was doing it very much for her. She was very much a gardener, loved flowers, and it was my way of working through what was going on when I wasn't able to see her. She was in New York and I was north of Boston, so I didn't get there more often than once a week or once every 10 days. In any event, it was clear when I showed her an image of it in her hospital bed that she knew just what it was about, and we never had to discuss it, and so it became a very special painting for me. It went, I'm happy to say, to some very dear friends of hers who keep it as a talisman of her as well. In any event, that started me on the path of painting potting sheds. There's a precursor to this one, same size, which is painted at night with the door closed, and so you get a lot of reflection in the window. This particular one started life with a much stormier sky, and I, maybe 3 or 4 months ago, decided that this had to be cheered up, had to be a little more hopeful. We couldn't really be waiting for Dorothy to run in yelling anti-M, anti-M. And although some people have seen a tornado cloud there, I don't think it is. But when I do these, I set out the geometry of the space, and then I think, okay, what am I going to put on that particular shelf? And I literally often do it shelf by shelf. I'm painting the objects out of my mind, and because I'm no more gifted at making ellipses than anybody else, that's the most tedious part. And invariably, in potting sheds, we have too many round things. Most fun was up in here to paint the things that you can partially see through the door of the window. At the top, you'll see there's a small clock. In the original potting shed, there was the clock, and then in the subsequent one, and also another pub painting of mine, and so it's rather become a trademark that those old-fashioned clocks are in my paintings. I am old enough that I actually can still read an analog clock. And in this particular one, a lot of attention was paid towards contrasting the warming, cool colors. This violet in all of this light is very strong, but of course it is very close to being exactly opposite on the color wheel from those yellow greens. It's just great fun for me to do, and I hope that everyone likes it. I would like it very much if somebody would take it home, as long as you provide a good home for it. If you're not going to provide a good home, I don't think you should take it home. In any event, that's all I can think of to tell you today. Thank you for being with me this time and last time. And if you get a chance, please go into the Guild during the last 2 weeks and see the show live. It's a lovely place, and I hope you like the paintings. Thank you.